Hi, everyone. Welcome to the May 8th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona, and I'll be joined very shortly by my co-host, Craig Milkowski. This week on the podcast, we're going to look ahead to Saturday and take a look at Gulfstream Park's Rainbow Six sequence. If you haven't seen, they're giving away a mandatory payout on Saturday's card, and those are the days you really do want to play the Rainbow Six. I saw there's a $2 million guarantee in the pool today when we're recording this on Friday, but as long as nobody hits it with one single ticket today, they'll be giving away the entire jackpot pool tomorrow. And in situations like that, you're kind of eliminating the takeout, so those mandatory payout days are the ones you want to play. And this sequence is actually pretty interesting. It's races 7 through 12 on Saturday. One stakes race in the sequence that drew a pretty nice field for just, I think it's a $75,000 stakes race on the turf. We'll get to that in a little bit. Craig, how are you doing this weekend?
I'm doing good. As you know, I kind of looked over these races. At first, I wasn't all that excited about it, but you kind of talked me into it. And as I look through, there are some really good races in the sequence. And, you know, I'm not one who is a big horizontal guy, especially pick sixes. But on the mandatory days, I think it's worth taking a shot for sure. As you said, the takeout's basically eliminated. There was a time when it was even a really high positive expectation bet a lot of times, but people have figured that out. And it generally gets bet to where, you know, it's just basically break even or maybe slightly positive, but we don't get that kind of situation in horse racing very often. So good day for players.
No, there's rarely situations where you get that kind of value at the racetrack. So even if you're not typically a pick six player with the 20-cent minimum, it gives you a chance to at least take a shot at it. Although these sequences are rarely easy, and this one definitely is not simple either. We'll get to some of the tougher races later on, but let's begin and dive right in with the first race in this pick six sequence. It's the 7th race on that Saturday card. This one is a 5-furlong turf sprint. Allowance, 3-year-old fillies going that sprint distance, and pretty interesting field here. I think that the likely favorite will be the one in the morning line. That's the number 3, Fast C. And she ended her 2019 campaign with a bit of a disappointment, fading to last in that Indian Summer Stakes against the boys. But she's back in against the fillies here, and 5 furlongs just seems like it's the perfect distance for her on the turf.
It does. This is the kind of race, if it wasn't for the pick six, I probably wouldn't give it a second look. I don't have any horses I love, any particularly strong insights, but I was able, personally, I narrowed it down to about 4 horses. The first one, as you mentioned, would clearly be Fast Scene. She's really fast. She's only going 5 furlongs. She did lose pretty bad last time, but when you see Kamari won that race, you know, it kind of takes a little bit of the sting out of it. We have the pace pretty fast early that day, and this is clearly a drop in class. So I think she is one to beat. Foolish Humor, who I think is the second choice on the morning line at 7-2, is another that's going to be dangerous. Just the fact she's ridden by a Red Ortiz, I think you have to take notice. I wouldn't think anybody would want to lose in the first leg of the Rainbow Six by leaving in a Red Ortiz horse off their ticket. And she's second off a pretty long layoff. She ran okay last time, so I think she's one I would probably use in here. Compensates another, the 10 horse Draws Outside that I think is a pretty strong contender in here. I think she actually has the best TimeformUS speed figure last time. She ran a 92 when the runner up in a small stake at Gulfstream, race won by Hear My Prayer. And she ran okay. And she's actually only run twice on turf, but both times she's run pretty well. And it's probably her best surface. If I had to mention one other horse I'd use in here, it's the shipper from France, Aficionado, moves into the Patrick B. and Cone barn. She's probably the weakest of the others in here. I think this is probably going to turn out to be too short for her. But again, it's another in the first leg. Would I want to get beat with this horse winning the race? It's probably a no for me.
Yeah, I agree with you that Fast Scene is just the horse to beat in this race. If I was making picks, I'd make her my top pick. I'm not expecting to get any kind of good price on her, but if I was going to play like an ABC kind of wager in the Rainbow Six, which is not easy to construct, I mean, it would be a situation where she might be the only A for me, and I'd use some B's and C's. Behind her, I agree with you, the European import Aficionado. She's pretty interesting here. I know that her time form ratings from her 2-year-old season are not that high compared to some of the TimeformUS speed figures that the others are running, but she does have a right to improve by now. And we do see a lot of these horses over in Europe improve their time form ratings quite a bit from their 2-year-old to 3-year-old seasons. And it seemed like the 7 furlongs that she was asked to go in that Group 3 last time was just way too far for her, especially over soft ground. She just didn't have the stamina to do that. I know that an American 5 furlong sprint can often be too quickly run for these European horses, but it seems like shorter is better for her, so I'll use her. Watching that Melody of Colors last time that both Foolish Humor and Compensate come out of, I can't make a case for using Foolish Humor over Compensate. Compensate just ran the much better race that day. She finished off pretty well after getting a good trip. Foolish Humor is one that I know that Irad Ortiz is riding her and it's Wesley Ward, but if she wins this race, I'm going to be knocked out. I just can't use her. I don't like any of her races. She beat an extremely weak field when she broke her maiden at Belmont last year as a 2-year-old. And in my opinion, she just hasn't gone on at all since then. I didn't like her last race at all. She just hit a wall about a half mile into that race. The final furlong, she was just, asking somebody to pass her at the end of that race. I know Irad Ortiz is getting aboard and he works some magic, but I don't know. I can't use her off that last race. The one other horse I would throw in is the number 9, Envied. She's more of like a B or C type for me, but she ran fine last time, closing in that allowance race. This is maybe a slightly tougher spot, but if the pace heats up front, she could pick up some pieces.
Yeah, I'm with you. Foolish Humor would be a C for me, as would Aficionado. And it's mostly because, as you mentioned, I just think these 5 furlong sprints are really tough on the European shippers. It's just a lot faster here. I kind of always use, even in the Breeders' Cup, I've tossed the Euros with a lot of success. So for me, it's a stretch to even use that one on my ticket, but I would be pretty upset if I didn't and she won. So I'm good with that. Envied's one. I'll probably go back and watch her race. I kind of dismissed her just because she seems like one that doesn't have a lot of speed and would have to get really lucky at a price. Not at a price, but she'd have to get really lucky with the pace in here.
Let's move on to the second leg of this sequence. It's the 8th race. This one is a $16,000 condition claimer for horses that haven't won 2 races in their lifetime. And I think we're going to have a prohibitive favorite here at the number 5, Louis Kingdom. Once again, this is a horse that Irad Ortiz is riding, so that's going to drive down the price further. Larry Reveille horses always seem to have a high chance of winning races. And this one's just taking a big class drop. He's off the claim. They took him back for $30,000. Larry Reveille and these connections had this horse for much of his career, was claimed away by Jorge Navarro, who had him for 1 race. And now off the claim, they're basically slashing his claiming price in half. Usually that's not a good sign, but in this current racing climate, I'm trying not to make too much of these big class drops.
Yeah, he's clearly the horse to beat. And I actually looked up this class drop on Formulator for the trainer. He doesn't do it a lot. And I was a little liberal. I put in a 50% drop. I guess this isn't quite 50%, but in those situations, he's 3 for 8, still has a positive ROI. So it is a move he wins with. And as you note, he's always dangerous off the claim and taking his own horse back. There must be something he likes there. The horse, if this horse runs his race, he's kind of got the field over the barrel. So this is a race where I'm not going to go very deep at all. I'm going to use the 5 Louis Kingdom. He would be an A for me. The one other horse I consider is the 4 War Act in here. I really like this maiden win 2 back where he got an 86 TimeformUS speed figure, which is actually competitive with the favorite. And then last time he was in a race without a lot of pace and just kind of lagged back and wasn't able to make his run. But even then, his figure only dropped from an 86 to an 80. And if I could beat the 5 Louis Kingdom, it would be with War Act. There's not a whole lot of the others I could see winning in here.
Yeah, we view this one pretty similarly. Louis Kingdom, the most likely winner, way the horse to be, definitely an A for playing the pick 6. I gave a look to War Act for all the reasons that you mentioned. I don't really have anything to add. He's clearly not as likely to win as Louis Kingdom, but he's going to be a much bigger price. The horse that I would take a shot with in this race, and to be clear, I would just really use 3 horses, not all of them in the same capacity, but they'd be Louis Kingdom, War Act. And the horse that I'd be most interested in to possibly upset Louis Kingdom is the number 2 Harper Go Lucky. At first glance, I know that he just looks way too slow, but I've liked some things about his races. First time out, he was in a slow-paced race. He overcame that pace and was the only horse that really made a big run from the back to get up and beat today's rival Cat Gone Quick, who came back to break his maiden next time out. And then after that, they tried to stretch Harper Go Lucky out in distance. Again, he found himself in a race that didn't feature a whole lot of pace. It was over a somewhat speed-favoring track that seemed to really carry along the winner of that race. And horses have come back out of that race and improved their TimeformUS speed figures, particularly the third-place finisher Silvery Enough. And this is going to be the first time now that Harper Go Lucky gets back to sprinting on dirt. He's got to run faster. He's got to get a bit of pace in front of him, but he's going to be a price in this race. And I think he's a bit better than he looks. So I'll mostly use Louis Kingdom on top and maybe use Harper Go Lucky and War Act as some backups in this race.
Good. And I like your use of the charts. It's one of my favorite parts of TimeformUS to really dig through those charts and see how the races turned out. And as we know from experience, even when these races look easy on these Rainbow 6 days and these mandatory payouts, there's always a couple that just don't turn out that way. So you definitely want to have some prices on your tickets.
The next race in this sequence is the 9th on the card, and this is the feature race. It's the Sunshine Forever Stakes, and one of the strongest $75,000 stakes that I think you'll ever see, because honestly, this could be a graded stakes race with the quality that's been drawn into this field. There just aren't that many places for these older turf horses to run right now. They're not going to be running that Grade 1 Woodford Reserve Turf Classic that they would typically have run on Derby Day, and I think you're seeing a lot of horses that would have been in that race running in this stakes race at Gulfstream instead. There's a lot going on in here. Todd Pletcher definitely has a strong hand with both Halliday and Social Paranoia. Social Paranoia upset that Appleton last time with that big last to first move. We talked about how getting back to a mile might have been the right move for him, and now this race is just a mile on the 16th. So that's definitely within Social Paranoia's wheelhouse. I just wonder if Social Paranoia is going to get quite as much pace to close into this time.
Yeah, that last time, I mean, he did run well, of course, but it was a dream setup. I don't remember what the exact pace figures were in TimeformUS. I want to say early was like a 170, which is something you're just not going to see very often. So he did get a dream setup. And to be honest, he's slower than quite a few of the horses in here on their best day. So I think he's 3-1. He's a second choice on the morning line. He's the one out of all the short prices that I'm not going to be on. I'm just not a big fan of his. Admission Office, I think you really need to start with him. He's a horse who is clearly the class of the field. He's running nothing but graded stakes lately. Grade 1s and grade 2s run very well. He was second in that Mac Armada behind Zulu Alpha. But the one concern with him is this race just a little bit too short for him. He ran well last time going longer distances. He's run well at 1 1/8, but 1 1/16 seems to really be pushing it for me for a horse who doesn't like speed, doesn't have much early speed. He also draws far outside, so there's a good chance he's going to get shuffled back pretty far in the field and lose some position trying to get to the inside. So while I'll certainly use Admission Office, I do think he is one that I'm willing to take a shot against. I certainly wouldn't be singling him or anything in here. Before I go too much further, I do want to ask, we haven't even mentioned yet, the return of the Preakness winner, War of Will, in here. He draws the far outside, and usually my default setting on a horse like this, trying turf for the first time, is just to try to beat him. But he is listed at 10-1 on the morning line, and I'm curious what you think about him.
Yeah, I mean, we agree about Admission Office. I don't have a whole lot to add. He is the horse to beat in this race. If you look at his TimeformUS speed figures, they just kind of tower over the rest of this field in the sense that they're all above 120. I also have that concern that 1 1/16 is a little short for him, and he's just one of these horses that takes money quite a bit of the time, and he just rarely wins races. He's often closing at the end. He'll get a piece, but he doesn't quite get there. So I'm using him, but he's not a horse that I think is... If he's the most likely winner of this race, it's not by much. And as for War of Will, who you just brought up, I'm going to make him my top pick in this race, actually, which I was kind of surprised about when I looked at this race. I forgot how well he ran on turf as a 2-year-old. I know you look at his record and you see, oh, well, he lost 4 times on the turf, but he ran pretty well in a number of those races, including that Summer Stakes when he was second to Fog of War. Even in the Breeders' Cup, he ran a pretty good race that day after going a little bit wide on the turns. And they turned him into a dirt horse, and he definitely has improved since his 2-year-old season on the dirt. But I'm not going to be shocked, given his pedigree, if he actually turns out to be okay on the turf, going one of these shorter distances, like a mile and a 16th. And I've been watching some of his workouts on XBTV prepping for this race, and that turf work on April 12th, where he went 57-3. I mean, that was just a thing of beauty. I don't give out workout ratings because I'm not a clocker, but that would be an A workout in my book. I mean, he just did it without any encouragement so easily. Definitely got over the turf that day. So drawing the outside post here, Tyler Gaffaleon's going to be able to really pick his spot heading into that first turn, because War of Will is a horse that wants to race close up to the pace. And I don't see that much early speed in here. So I do think he's going to get that kind of position that you see on the pace projector, stalking just outside, maybe in the 2 or 3 path. So I think War of Will is pretty dangerous here. I don't think we're going to get that 10-1 on the Preakness winner, but he's not going to be the favorite.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that. I had, to be honest, completely forgot he began his career on turf. It was so long ago, and he did run fine. But yeah, I actually kind of like him in here, especially given that he's going to be a big price. Not a big price. I don't think we're going to get that 10-1, but I think he's going to be in the 5-1, 6-1 range most likely, and I think he's worth a shot. That said, he's not going to be my top pick in here. That would be the 6th Halliday. I just really liked his last race. He was challenged a little bit early, fought it off. He set a fast, honest pace. Not fast in the sense that it's coded and read by us, but it was just pretty even throughout with a really high cruising speed. And I personally think he's going to make the lead in here. We have this as on the pace projector as a race where El Tormenta is set to make the lead, but I'm not so sure about that. He's not really a front runner, El Tormenta. He's done it in the past, but for the most part, he's more of a pace presser, a few lengths off the lead. And I was just super impressed by Halliday last time. And I think if he gets left alone early, he's going to be really dangerous in here.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Halliday. I know that he earned that big speed figure last time, which looks legitimate enough. I had some disagreements with some people who were saying that he set a fast pace last time. I thought he set a very comfortable pace that really favored the front runner. That was a race that had plenty of speed on paper, and it was one of those situations where a lot of jockeys just grabbed coming out of the gate. They basically handed Halliday the lead into that first turn. The first quarter of 23-3, when you go the mile of 132-3, that's a pretty moderate to slow first quarter, and that really just gave Halliday the race because he did quicken up in the middle of the race after that. But it's a situation where after you get away with that slow first quarter, it's not going to take that much out of you to go a quicker run down the backstretch. And he just blew that race open around the far turn. Look, Halliday's a good horse, but I think he's going to be facing a tougher field this time than that Allowance race last time. And a mile and a 16th, that's pushing this horse to the limit. He's really a 7 furlong to a mile kind of horse. When he's gone a mile and a 16th in the past, he'll get it, but he's always getting leg worry at the end of these races. Against a field that's of this quality, I can't put him on top, but I'll definitely use him defensively.
Yeah, any others you want to mention in here? There, I was a little El Tormenta. I was curious about him. He kind of had that weird trip last time where he rushed up wide, went up, kind of fought for the lead, and just really quit. But I just couldn't get to where I could make him a contender. That last race was just too bad for me. I know he won the Woodbine Mile last year. It's kind of hard to say a horse that just 3 starts won a Grade 1 race. Albeit as a really long shot that day, but he still got the win. Isn't a contender in just a small listed stakes, but I just couldn't make that leap personally.
Yeah, he is a tough call. I mean, for a trip handicapper like me, I'm supposed to take a long look at this horse because, as you said, he just got one of those impossible turf trips last time. But it really was his own fault because he just is a horse that is really hard to get to settle early in his races. He gets super headstrong, and I imagine that's why they're taking the blinkers off this time, because he just got too headstrong to be competitive last time, at least late in the race. When he's at his best, he's good enough to beat a field like this, but a mile and 16th also for him is a little too far. He got the 1-turn mile at Woodbine 3 back, but I feel like a 2-turn mile and 16th might be a little bit tough for him, especially against a field that's this good. So I couldn't make him as a top pick in this race. He'd be more of like a 5th or 6th or like a C type for me. But if he's a big price, I'll use him underneath. The one other horse I'd want to mention is the number 7 Hawkish. Again, he's not my top pick by any means, but maybe he's a horse to throw in as like a C in a multi-race sequence because he does have ability in there somewhere. And he wanted no part of going 6 furlongs last time. That seemed like it was just a prep for something. And I guess something happened after that because it turned out to be a prep for nothing because he was off for a while after that for last race at Belmont. But when he was at his best last year, he was running some pretty nice speed figures. Seems like he's working well for the return. It's a tough spot, but he's going to be a price in this race. So he's one that I would throw in sort of like a C in multi-race sequences or an underneath type in exotics.
Yeah, and that's what makes these Rainbow Sixes so tough. They're always deep competitive fields, and it's so easy just to leave out a horse you know you can win, but you can't use them all. So you got to make those kind of decisions.
Let's move on to the 10th race in this card. That's the 4th race in this Rainbow Six sequence. And this one's going to feature another prohibitive favorite, probably in the number 6 Battle of Blenheim, going out for Mike Maker with Irad Ortiz aboard. Just a horse that seems to be in good form right now for Mike Maker. They've been reluctant to move this horse up in class. It seems like he's just consistently dropping down the class ladder. There are definitely some physical issues with this 6-year-old because they're always dangling him for a tag that seems to be a little bit lower than he really should be running for. But this is a race that also has an allowance condition, so you've got some horses in here with a bit more upside. Battle of Blenheim is one of the more experienced members of this field. He is the horse to beat, but this is never the kind of horse that I want to rely on in a sequence like this.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I certainly wouldn't single him, but I also certainly wouldn't toss him out by any means because he can easily win this race. He's been super consistent since he moved to the new barn. I think his last 4 races since he was claimed are all within 2 points of each other in that 110 to 112 range on our speed figures. So he will clearly be on my tickets. He'd even be an A, but again, I wouldn't single him. If I was looking for some that could beat him, I'd probably start with Harbor Master. He's a bit of a price, but he does have some figures that can beat him. He's run faster in the past. He moves to the barn of Patrick Biancone coming off a layoff. So he's one that I like a little bit in here. I don't really love anyone. I guess I'd give number 9 Honey Wone a chance. I think she gets he gets a nice jockey change to Luis Saez, who's been winning quite a bit at Gulfstream. Had a bit of a tough trip, kind of battled inside, chasing what was a fairly quick pace last time before fading. But, he's coming back in the same spot. And I actually like that he moves outside a little. Well, he was outside last time, but he wound up kind of toward the inside. I like that he's probably going to get a more stalking trip and be able to see what happens in front of him. The one negative, the horse I don't really like in here that actually has decent figures is Gray's Fable. He broke his maiden last time, but it's really the kind of horse I look to beat next time out. He was never really challenged. He set a very moderate pace and just had plenty left late. Ran a 109 TimeformUS speed figure that day, but he's one I just don't see getting anywhere near that kind of trip this time. And he hasn't shown to me he can win any other way. I mean, obviously that was his maiden win, but he didn't run well at all when he's been off the pace in the past. And I think these are just much better horses.
I'm glad because we completely disagree in this race, so we could have a bit of a difference of opinion here. I mean, of the horses that are going to take a little bit of money, I actually don't like the 2 horses that you mentioned. Honey Won't for me. I'm just not a fan of this horse. I thought he got a ridiculously favorable setup 2 back when he won against much weaker company. And then last time out, he just wasn't nearly as good as Battle of Blenheim. They've got very similar trips up close to a pace that did fall apart at the end. But he was really just spent at the end of that race. And I mean, even a horse like today's rival, Sublime Appeal, beat him that day. And I don't like Sublime Appeal that much in here. So Honey Won't, I'm just not a fan of this horse. I guess he can win, but for me, he's one of the least appealing of the short prices. And Harbor Master, I did give this horse a long look because, as you said, Harbor Master has back speed figures from 2017 and 2018 that would make him competitive here. When he was in Jim Cassidy's barn last year, though, he ran twice. He finished last in both of those races. I watched them. I just didn't see a whole lot. I also have been looking at some of his recent workouts, and Patrick Biancone has been using this horse as a target for some other horses in the morning. He actually worked this horse in company with Aficionado, who's running in that sprint race in the 7th, and he used this horse as a target for her. And it seems like Harbor Master is the higher quality horse, so I just thought that was somewhat interesting. And he's in for the $25,000 tag, so I didn't know what to make of any of that, but I was going to take a negative view of him. I actually like Grace Fable, and he'd be my top pick in this race. He'd be the only horse that I would put ahead of Battle of Blenheim. I agree that he got a very favorable setup when he broke his maiden last time. On the other hand, he's one of the few horses that still has upside in this field. And I actually think he's a pretty good turf horse that just hasn't really been in the right situation until last time. I mean, when he ran on the turf prior to that, he was asked to go 9 furlongs back in February in that really tough Golden Tappet race. And if you watch that race, he actually ran pretty well that day. I'm not sure that he wants to come from as far back as they placed him in that spot, but he still stayed on pretty well to be 4th against a good field behind a horse who's going to be bound for graded stakes, a horse that probably would have been a player in that Sunshine Forever we just talked about if they had chosen to run in there. And prior to that, he was just up against a slow pace back in January. He's not going to get that favorable pace setup that he got last time with Battle of Blenheim and some other speeds in this field. But I do think Grace Fable has real ability, and he just seems like the kind of horse that can take a step forward first time against winners. So I'd make him my top pick by a slight margin over Battle of Blenheim. And the one other horse that I would use in this race, because there are really just 3 horses that I would even use on any tickets, are Battle of Blenheim, Grace Fable, and that other horse is the number 11, Shootin' the Breeze. Shootin' the Breeze does have back class from last year as a 3-year-old. He faced some really good horses. You see Value Proposition, Valid Point, the Marshalier, Clinton Maroon, A Thread of Blue, all in his running lines. Now, he didn't win any of those races, but he finished somewhat close in a few of them. And last time out, he was again in that behind Golden Tappet in that allowance race. He was never really a threat to win, but he was in the mix at the 8th pole, just kind of sputtered in the late stages. And that's been his MO. He often gets a piece and doesn't win races, but he does have quality. He's getting Joel Rosario aboard, so I'll use him as the 3rd horse in this race.
Yeah, he's the other horse. We do agree on him. I will have him on my tickets for sure. As you said, not really much to say about his races. I totally agree on those. And just the big rider switch is the big thing for me. Moving to Joel Rosario from Victor LeBron is no offense to Victor LeBron, but he's just in another league.
Head on to the 11th race on this card. And this pick 6 sequence, while it was tough initially in the first 4 races, I think these were 4 races that we could make some sense of. It gets pretty difficult to narrow it down as we get to these last 2 legs, or at least I thought that. This is a state-bred, Florida-bred optional claiming race with a $16,000 tag, also a non-winners of one other than allowance condition. And you've got a little bit of everything in this race. You've got some 3-year-olds facing older horses with some good speed figures from back when they broke their maidens. You've got some more experienced runners that are in for that $16,000 tag. It's hard to really know where to start. I guess we'll begin with those 3-year-olds because you've got I'll Fight Dempsey, who got involved in a fast pace last time and couldn't hang on going 7 furlongs. He's moving back to 6 furlongs now. You've also got the very intriguing returnee Tappet to Win, who I know that I liked quite a bit off his maiden victory at Saratoga last summer, but he just completely fell apart when they stretched him out in distance in Kentucky last year. I don't know what we're going to get from him off the layoff, but if either of these 2 horses run back to their maiden victories, they're going to be tough.
Yeah, for sure. I think Tappet to Win is really the enigma in here. I mean, he was only 3-1 in that Breeders' Futurity that was eventually run by Maxfield. He set the pace and just obviously packed it in. And I remember thinking how bad that race was. Something must have went wrong, but he ran back just 3 weeks later in a smaller stakes. I think it was the Street Sense at Churchill, and basically the same thing. He did no running at all. So now he comes in off a long layoff. Generally, if I was just betting this race alone, he'd be a horse I would be against. But in a Rainbow Six, I can't blame anybody if they want to use him on their tickets. And I'd say the same for I'll Fight Dempsey. I don't really love him in here, but I think he's okay. And on our speed figures, he actually ran better second time out losing than he did first time, as his speed figure improved 6 points. But that was obviously a much tougher field. He got pressure early. He does turn back to 6 furlongs, but there is quite a bit of speed in here. So it's going to be a pretty tough ask. I'll use him, but I'm certainly not going to single him or even probably wouldn't even consider him an A. The one horse I'm really against is the second choice in here, our Mercedes boy. He's a horse. He's an older horse, a 4-year-old who comes in, and I just don't think he's fast enough, either early or late. He doesn't have the speed figures to win this kind of race, and he also doesn't. He's a horse who likes to be up near the lead, and he's shown pretty far back in the pace projector, and he's the one I would take a shot against for sure. Whiskey Sunrise is another horse in the field that I gave a look to. He draws outside. He was impressive last time. He only ran a 99 speed figure, but he did it setting a pretty quick pace. He dueled early and then pulled away. One thing I can say for sure about him, I wouldn't make him a top contender in here, but he is definitely going to make it tough on the rest of the field in here because he just has that look. He has that outside post, is a horse that wants to go, and he's going to cause trouble. He's the reason I don't love I'll Fight Dempsey, because I think he's going to cause some problems for him. Another horse I don't particularly like at all, and this time it is Irad Ortiz, is Haunted by the Music. He won easily at first time out back at Tampa, but it's a race where I dove into the charts again, and it just has not been a very productive race at all. I looked through the entire field. They're actually 1 for 23 running back in dirt races. I think there was a turf win mixed in there somewhere, but that one win on the dirt was a 4.5 furlong state bred race at Charlestown, and I think it was a horse that finished last or somewhere near the bottom. So while he looked good, his figure was just okay, and it's just hard to have a lot of faith in that horse for me. One horse I will definitely take a shot with in here, is given all the speed, is Cryogenic. He's a horse who's been running mostly on turf, but he's the one horse who I think will be coming late. He does have some good races to turn back to. He is stretching out the 5 furlongs. All of his previous dirt races have been those off the turf 5 furlong variety. But I do find it interesting that he's actually entered on this on dirt this time, and it is 6 furlongs, which could help his run a little bit. But pretty wide open race. I'll definitely be spreading, but I guess I'd make Cryogenic my top pick in here.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned 6 different horses, and it's that kind of race because you can make a case for so many of them. What I'll say is, if I knew that all of these horses were going to run back to the best race they've ever run, I would say, well, Tapit to Win's going to win this race, because you remember that August 24th maiden victory at Saratoga. Not only did he earn a 111 TimeformUS speed figure that day as a 2-year-old in the summer, but also that was Travers Day, when the rail was completely dead for every dirt race at Saratoga, and he was the only horse on that entire card that hugged the rail the entire way and still ran a career top figure. So, I mean, arguably that win is even better than it looks. Why did he not run back to it in his 2 subsequent starts? I can't tell you that. I don't think it was just the distance, because, like you said, he just showed nothing in those races. He's got to get out of the gate this time, because we don't know that he can really rate off horses. A lot of concerns with him, but there is plenty of ability in there somewhere. As for I'll Fight Dempsey, the other younger horse that's drawn down towards the inside, what I don't like about his last race is that, I mean, he did get involved in a fast pace, but he was beaten home by 2 of the other speeds. He was dueling early with Golden Candy and Ralston, and they finished ahead of him. I mean, he was supposed to beat those horses as the 1 to 2 favorite. So he can win this race, I guess, but I was a little bit against him at a short price. Have nothing to add that Haunted by the Music. I agree. That was a weak race. Even with Irad Ortiz aboard, that wasn't enough for him to be a top pick for me. Our Mercedes boy, I'm kind of in alignment with you on those TimeformUS speed figures not being fast enough. I don't know if you look at the Buyers much, but he did earn a 96 Buyer speed figure for that October 25th victory back at Gulfstream Park West. That figure makes no sense at all to me if you look at that field. It just is a real outlier for almost everybody in that race, and it's one that the Buyer folks should probably take a look at adjusting down, maybe even by 15 points or so, because it's just way too high. So I wouldn't be betting our Mercedes boy if I were you, based on that Buyer speed figure. Cryogenic, I think he makes a lot of sense for all the reasons you mentioned. He's the closer in a race filled with speed. Is he good enough on dirt to beat this field? I don't really know, but he's not as bad on the dirt as I think I thought when I first looked at him and just kind of dismissed him as a turf horse. He's run okay going 5 furlongs and off the turf races. The real question is, can he do it against horses that are actually entered for dirt? Because he's been beating mostly turf horses in those off the turf races, but he's going to get the right setup, so I'll definitely use him. If I had to make a top pick in this race, it would be that horse that you mentioned on the outside, the 11 Whiskey Sunrise. I know that the speed figure didn't come back that fast for his last race, but I just liked the way that he did it because he got involved in a three-way duel. The two horses that he dueled with in the early going, they ended up losing by 14 and 20 lengths. If you look in the TimeformUS charts, you can see how far back they finished. And he put away those horses early on the far turn, held off a runner that took a shot at him late. I know Victory Town, who was second, came back and lost at a short price yesterday, but he actually improved his speed figure that day in doing so. And trainer Michael Yates, especially when he teams up with Miguel Vasquez, they just win at a very high rate. Michael Yates has good numbers off maiden victories if you look up those stats in Formulator. And I like the outside post on a horse that might just be the speed of the speed in this race. And sometimes in these races, as we've talked about, when there's so much speed signed on and I don't love any of the closers, I'm just going to take the best speed horse in the race, in my opinion. And that might be the number 11 Whiskey Sunrise. So I'll make him my top pick, and he's not going to be that short of a price.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And the outside post definitely should help him a bit. I do want to say, I don't look at other speed figures very often. I mean, I'll see them on Twitter from time to time, but I never really dig in to see what other people do because I don't want to be influenced. That includes Bayer. People like to tell me about Brisnet figures and the sheets on Twitter, but and that's fine. I don't mind them telling me, but I don't really look. The one good thing about us being slow this time of year is Gulfstream was the only track to run yesterday. So like you said, normally that figure we see for Victory Town in the chart would not be there. But since there's so little going on, I was able to do those last night and upload them, and they're already there. So that's at least one very small sliver of light in what's a pretty sad time for horse racing.
Yeah, we can get that work done in timely fashion, which is not always the case when we're in the busy part of the season. Let's finish things up with the 12th race, the final leg of this pick six sequence. And this one is a doozy. If I had an unlimited budget, I'd probably use 9 different horses in this race because there are a lot of runners that can win. I think you have to start the conversation in this 1 mile starter allowance optional claimer with the number 3, Pepe the Hunter, who is the favorite on the morning line. Definitely has a set of speed figures that are a little bit faster than the rest of this field, but he's claimed away from Saffy Joseph. He's a horse that was in the barn of Jorge Navarro for a long time. Now he's with a trainer, Diane Marici, who I looked up in Formulator. She's only started one horse since 2017. She hasn't sent out a winner since July of 2016, and a rider who hasn't won yet this year. So definitely connections that aren't really winning types on a horse that's a short price. Not the runner that I want to rely on the last leg of the sequence.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. I actually, the first thing I did, because I didn't know who the trainer was, I went to look up how people do claiming off of Saffy Joseph. And believe it or not, it was a little bit surprising. It was better than I thought it would be. It was a 23% win percentage, 1.73 ROI, which isn't great, but it's probably about average. I actually expected it to be worse. If people are wondering how I did that, in the old formula, in the new formulator, that option is not available yet, but it is still in the legacy. So I clicked over to the legacy version, and you can look how people do when trainers get claimed away from. You just click on that trainer. I found a horse trained by Saffy Joseph, clicked on him and ran that query. So it wasn't as bad as I expected. I expected it to be like Jorge Navarro, like where he was, real low percentage, terrible ROI, but it wasn't. But the current connections certainly give pause. I ran the query. It's a very small sample. She does fine off the with the first time in the barn. I think it was like 3 for 17 for 18% with an okay ROI. What stuck out to me is it's much better than how she does normally, which was 10% and like a 1.00 ROI. But who knows what's going on with this horse? And I totally agree with you. I don't want any parts of a short price on this kind of connections and this kind of horse. So like you said, we could look at a whole bunch of different horses in here. One that interested me was the number 2 Trapezoid. I think he's going to get a pretty decent setup in here. He has some nice speed figures. He got caught really wide last time, so that drop from a couple of 95s down to an 88 is one that's probably not as bad as it looks. The 6 horse, the Queen's Jewels, is another that I like. Doesn't run on dirt often, but when he does, he's handled it pretty well in the past. He had a 96 just 2 starts back, going the same mile, sat just off a fast pace in second, and he would probably be my top pick. But it's just say there's so many ways you can go in here, and I'm curious where you're looking at.
Yeah, it's really tough to sort of separate these horses. I'll use Pepe the Hunter. Obviously, I'm not going to let him beat me, but he's not the horse I'd want to rely on as, a lone A in this race or anything like that, or a single. This is not that kind of race. If I had to make a top pick in this race, I would go down towards the rail to the number 1, the Robert. This is a horse who's been running at Parks, but he started to really hit his stride towards the end of 2019. And I like his couple of races for the Guadalupe Preciado barn, especially 2 back when he won that 12-5 claimer. He was just much the best that day. He ranged up with a ton of horse around the far turn, had to wait in traffic for a little bit, and then got through and really sealed the deal impressively that day. Then last time out, he was in a very slow-paced race, never really had a chance to close from the back of the pack, and that was subtly a much tougher field than he's meeting here. If you look at the race rating in the TimeformUS PPs, that one got a race rating of a 105 compared to today's of a 98. The winner of that race, Loving Me Is Easy, has earned a bunch of big speed figures. So that's just a much tougher spot. And it seems like the kind of horse that Joao Rosario can really give a good ride to, because he's going to be patient. He's going to let him settle at the back of the pack, try to make one run. That's what Joao Rosario's specialty is. I know these connections don't run a Gulfstream that often, but I think this is one that could have a shot here at a price. I guess if I'm going to try to narrow it down, I'd also use the Queen's Jewels, although I don't love his dirt races, but it's a Rad Ortiz. He's probably going to get a good trip stalking outside of the speed, so I'm not going to let him beat me. The one other horse that I'd throw in at a price is the number 4, Are You Talking to Me? I don't think he's going to be 20-1 because I think he's run too well to be at that big of a price, but he's going to be, he's not going to be the favorite in this race and not close to it. And I like his last couple of races. The Apprentice, Fuentes was on him the last couple of times, and I just thought each of those last 2 races, he tried to get a little too cute, made premature moves around the far turn, up the inside, hit a bit of traffic both times, especially 2 back when he arguably could have won that race if he didn't lose momentum when they tried to make that move up the inside. I think this other Apprentice that gets on him here, Trejos, has been riding pretty well. So he's going to still get that Apprentice weight allowance. And his last couple of speed figures are okay. They put him in the mix, and he'll be a price. So I'll mostly use 1, 3, 4, and 6 in this spot.
Yeah, I like your top pick in here, the Robert. He's certainly one I would use. He does have our best late pace rating in a race we predict to have a fast pace. I'll just mention one other horse I'd use in here. I wouldn't want him to beat me. That's a 9, Dexter Road. He's just been really consistent of late. He hasn't won a lot lately, but he's been running pretty well. He's been running lower 90 type speed figures. He should get a decent trip sitting off the pace from his outside post. So he's one other that I'll have on my ticket.
Yeah, I'll just say the one horse in here that's going to take money that I don't like is the number 10 Starship Apollo. This horse to me is just a confirmed sprinter. They've tried to go long with him a number of times during his very long career, and he just doesn't handle distances beyond 7 furlongs. Sometimes he doesn't even handle 7 furlongs. So he's one with Luis Saez aboard that I'd be a little bit against, but it's hard to dismiss horses in a race like this because it can go so many ways. Some of these older runners go in form and out of form seemingly without warning. So you just want to catch them at the right time. So I'm not going to be too critical of any picks in this race because it's definitely a spread affair to end this sequence. So hopefully we give out some good opinion. Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm with you on the 10. I don't like him at all. And this 10th race or 12th race, if by some chance I was alive, it's not one I would want to be alive to 1 or 2 or even 3 horses. I'd hope it would be more than that because this is just a really tough race.
Yeah, and I'm hoping we gave out some good ideas, but it's tough to end this sequence. And I'll just check in with you. I think you agree with me that the places that you'd narrow this sequence down a little bit are in the first few legs. That's at least how I feel with a fast seed in the first race and that big Larry Reveille favorite in the second division of or the second leg of this sequence. I'd lean more heavily there and try to spread a bit later on.
Yeah, the first two leagues for me, even I'm not going to go deep in seventh or eighth race and try to spread later out. And if by somehow you get knocked out in those first couple, there's always pick fours or pick fives if you really like your opinions later on.
Yeah, as Harvey Pack used to say, even if you get knocked out of all of those, there's the late double and then a win bet in the last race if you get that far, if you have an idea. Hopefully we give out some good ideas on this podcast, and hopefully you have some luck with that Rainbow Six mandatory payout on Saturday. So thanks for listening this week. Remember, you can always catch our Pacecast and our TimeformUS Forecast on drf.com, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and SoundCloud. Wherever you get your podcast, just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Forum channel. As we said on the Pacecast last week, I don't think we're going to do a Pacecast upcoming this Tuesday because there's just not going to be that much, really, any stakes racing aside from this one at Gulfstream to recap. So we'll probably reconnect with you next week on another TimeformUS Forecast on Friday, a week from now. So thanks for listening this week, and we'll be back at you next Friday.